Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Thursday, October 24th. Derek VanRiper, Eno Sarris here with you. This is our 2024 World Series preview.
This is it?
This is the one.
Not the other four.
It was all building up to this. That was the long road, the detailed version of what we're going to do. This is the more condensed, meaty version, all of which should be enjoyable by my calculations. So on this episode, we're going to take a detailed look at the position players on both the Yankees and Dodgers, try and see if there is an edge within those groups. Spoiler alert, they're both great, and it's hard to find differences. We'll do our best to do that. We'll dig into the pitching matchups now that we have a little bit more of the schedule for the series. We're going to talk about the pitching plan. How do you game plan to face the league's two best lineups and some of the best hitters of all time? We'll get our predictions in at the end of the show as well. So a lot to discuss. And frankly, I'm also ready for the games to begin on Friday because I want to see if all the things we've been talking about play out the way that we hope that they're going to play out. But, we're going to begin with a position player breakdown. So much of the dialogue around this series focuses on Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Mookie Betts, and it's all for good reason. They are some of the biggest superstars the sport has right now. And I think the overall quality of these lineups is going to be on proper display and under the microscope in this series. If you remember, just a few short months ago, we had questions about the quality of the Yankees supporting cast behind Aaron Judge and Juan Soto, while Judge and Soto were putting together a historically great all-time season for a duo, right? We're going back to the 20s and the 40s to find comparable production from teammates to what Soto and Judge have done so far this year. And some of those questions have faded in recent weeks because Gleyber Torres has performed really well in the playoffs. Jazz Chisholm was acquired at the trade deadline. He was red hot when they acquired him, even though he hasn't done a lot in the postseason yet. You can look at this lineup on paper and tell yourself a better story about what they're capable of around the two biggest stars in the heart of the order.
Yeah, I think Anthony Volpe has really stepped forward in these playoffs, and they've taken on a collective identity that is similar to what they did in the regular season, but is sort of extra. The regular season, they did a really good job of not chasing pitches outside the zone. Now they've stepped that up another level in the postseason. Anthony Volpe has only chased at 12% of the pitches he's seen outside the zone. The average every year is 30%. Gleyber Torres at 17%, Alex Verdugo 19%, and then you add that to Judge and Soto, that's always been part of what they've done. So they've been the most patient team in the playoffs, and the Dodgers have been the second most patient team in the playoffs in terms of chasing pitches outside the zone. But I think for the Dodgers, it's a little bit less important because they have a deeper lineup, and they don't have as many of the questions that we've had about people like Volpe. You're talking about Muncy, and you're talking about Teoscar Hernandez. Like, there's a little bit more depth to the Dodgers lineup, so it's really important for Volpe to continue taking this very patient approach. It's really important for Stanton to continue knocking the crap out of the ball. It's really important for Verdugo to continue putting the ball in play, and to some extent, I think for them to hang and for them to bang with the Dodgers this year, it's really important for Jazz to find it, whatever it is. He's been the one that's been struggling this postseason, but he is what could give the Yankees more Dodgers-like depth to this lineup.
Yeah, because when you look at it, tail of the tape style, as they like to say, you put these two teams side by side and look at what they did in the regular season. We talk about WRC plus all the time on our show, a great catch-all metric for overall offensive value created. The Dodgers 18% better than league average as a team. They were first. The Dodgers 17% better. They were second. You look at strikeout rates. Both of these teams do a good job of tempering swing and miss overall. The Yankees were 9th during the regular season. The Dodgers were 11th. The difference, 0.2 percentage points. Minimal, right? Both teams are very patient. The Yankees walked more than anybody else throughout the regular season at 10.8%. Dodgers, 9.6%. These teams don't chase pitches outside the zone. They were first and second in O-swing percentage. The only differences you really see looking at them as a group is that the Yankees are less aggressive on pitches inside the strike zone. They had a 62.9% zone swing percentage during the regular season. That was the second lowest in the entire league. It's just kind of an oddity, which makes me wonder if a lot of that is driven by a player like Soto, who is extremely patient and might be comfortable just working the count until he gets the exact pitch that he wants.
Yeah, Soto is not actually that great on pitches low in the zone. He's got kind of a flatter swing. And when you can pitch to him is when you're dotting fastballs and sliders at the bottom, not even a third of the zone, sort of the bottom edge of the zone. And he takes those pretty regularly, hoping that you make more of a mistake up. And so that's the only way to really pitch to Juan Soto is get it in the zone, at the bottom of the zone, and just execute with great command. He will take those pitches.
As you start to think about where the differences will be within the series, the way you were looking at it before, saying, the Dodgers secondary guys, the next level bats around Ohtani and Betts, and Freddie Freeman is ordinarily part of that group, but I think because of his foot injury, it's more questions than answers. He just hasn't been himself this postseason. It's easy to see how hobbled he's been. Maybe the days off from the end of the NLCS to the World Series will actually help him get a little bit closer to 100%. But that secondary cast, the likes of Teoscar Hernandez and Max Muncy, they're just a little more established than some of the secondary options the Yankees are relying on. And at the bottom half of both of these lineups, I think you see a lot of similarities, actually. I mean, Anthony Rizzo coming back from injury is a nice lift for the Yankees. That gives them some depth. At times, Austin Wells has looked like a catcher that will be above average with the bat. That has not been the case so far in the postseason. He's been a lot like Jazz Chisholm in terms of his overall struggles, but Wells adds value with his defense behind the plate. So even if he doesn't hit a lot, he's still important to what the Yankees are doing right now. And Alex Verdugo, probably one of the more, maligned players within the Yankees fan base as far as his contributions this year. Having him in there instead of Jason Dominguez has been something we've wondered about for a long time, but that's been the preference of Aaron Boone and this club throughout the postseason. You look at Rizzo, Wells, Chisholm, and Verdugo versus the likes of Gavin Lux, Kike Hernandez, who's been really good on the big stage, Tommy Edman, who took NLCS MVP honors in the last round, and Andy Pages, who ends up playing a lot because he's an option for them in center field. It's sort of a question of maybe those four guys for each team having to step up and make the difference if the stars start to cancel each other out at the top.
Yeah, and we'll get to this in the pitching plan, but to some extent, there may be some walk this guy in the plan. And if you walk this guy when it comes to Ohtani or Muncy, because you don't really have enough lefties to avoid exposing your relievers to them so many times, if you just have a walk this guy, even an intentional four-finger walk or the unintentional intentional walk, that means runners on base when you get to the bottom of the order. I kind of think that it might be a little bit more sort of Teoscar Hernandez and Max Muncy and Stanton and who's the Rizzo or
Glaber. I think Glaber would be the he leads
yeah.
off, but he'd be kind of that other guy along with Stanton that would fit into that secondary group.
I kind of think because those guys will be alternating around, so those guys will be the first guys to come up with somebody on base. I mean, by the time you get to the Luxes of the world, you might have the bases loaded. If it's going poorly for the pitching team, and then things got a lot easier for them. Of course, that is also kind of how Tommy Edman got his NLCS MVP. Right? It's just came on with tons of runners on base, did not walk once, made a lot of contact, had a ton of RBI, and that I think if there is a guy on the other side, that's Verdugo. That's why they kept him around. That's why Jason Dominguez didn't take his job, was because Jason's defense in left field wasn't that great. Verdugo is a Gold Glove finalist, a little bit surprised by that, but also Verdugo makes a lot of contact. And Dominguez, as a swing and miss guy, if he came up with the bases loaded in the World Series, you might be able to get him to swing and miss and strike out. Whereas Verdugo, at least, put a lottery ticket out there.
Is there an edge for either one of these lineups just from a pure run production perspective?
I mean, I think you start getting into matchups on the pitching side and be like, who can pitch to who? And I think the lefties actually for both Ohtani and Soto are a real problem for the other team. Just in terms of, do I have enough? And it's possible that the Yankees with Nestor Cortez, along with Tim Hill and maybe Tommy Kahnle, who has a great changeup, it's possible they're better suited than the Dodgers. We don't know yet if Alex Vesia is making the roster. Even if Alex Vesia makes it, if he's 100%, Anthony Banda is sort of I guess he's Tim Hill-ish. And then what do they do? I suggest maybe Daniel Hudson in my pitching preview. When you start to think about it that way, you're like, it almost matters more who's pitching in each situation. You know what I mean? It's kind of hard to just be like, oh, across the board, this team is better than this team. I think I trust the Dodgers back end of the lineup more.
Yeah.
And I do think walk this guy will be part of the pitching strategy. And so I think I give the Dodgers a small advantage.
I completely understand where you're coming from, and yet I look at the Yankees and think I want the slight edge at the very, very top because the margins are so close. And I think as a duo, Soto plus Judge is just a hair better than Ohtani and Betts. It's a difference, as my friend Todd Zola would say, that I would never want to live off of. But
I think it's actually there. I mean, when we looked at it earlier in the season, Soto and Judge were having one of the 10 best paired up seasons ever. And they were up there with Ruth and Garrick, and they basically Ruth and Garrick incarnate. And so I do think that this version of Betts, 2-3 years ago Betts, it might have been closer. But this version of Betts, where you have Judge and Soto right in the peak of, their abilities right now, I would take Judge and Soto. So then Judge and Soto over Ohtani and Betts by a hair. And then you've got that secondary, which is Teoscar Hernandez and Max Muncy versus Gleyber and Stanton.
Oh man, you get more damage.
Crap!
On the Dodgers side.
Now I'm sort of agreeing with you.
Yeah,
I think I take Gleyber and Stanton.
I think I do too, in part because they've both done a great job. And this is less surprising with Gleyber Torres, but Stanton's done a great job of tempering strikeouts while getting to the power in the postseason too. And if he brings that approach, that just puts him up a level, whereas Teoscar Hernandez has that little bit of swing and miss that you worry about. Even Muncy has it. I was looking at Max Muncy's pitch splits, and he crushes four-seamers, but you can be opportunistic with four-seamers against him. You can also get him to swing and miss at them sometimes. So I think Muncy's going to be a really pivotal player for the Dodgers if he can get a bullpen matchup in his favor, if there's some command issues in the matchup against Muncy and he can make the Yankees pitching staff pay for them, that could be something that really closes that gap immediately. It's another very small difference because you're talking about extremely high quality players, and it's really a preference of what you want. If you want the added thump, Hernandez and Muncy are the better duo. If you want the balance, and I do think you could make the case for Gleyber Torres and Giancarlo Stanton, and then you go to the bottom. I'm with you on the bottom. I think
if I give you those, I still only gave you 4.
Yeah.
And the lineup is 9.
Lineup's 9. And
so if you give me 5, 5 is bigger than 4. But is it
the top
a bigger
4
difference? But the top 4 is better.
I'd rather have the top 4 than the bottom 5 as far as the small edges of the series go.
Yeah,
so then you have to look for the position player group. Look at it from a defensive perspective for a moment. I was surprised to see the Dodgers were 3rd during the regular season in defensive run save. It's from the Fielding Bible. Defensive run saves. It's an indication of how many runs a player saves or costs his team in the field compared to others at the position.
you may have been surprised by that because you're thinking maybe very specifically about their people that were on the field. So you're thinking, well, they played Mookie Betts at short for a long time, and then Miguel Rojas is like 30, and like, you know, now Tommy Edmonds, a 29-year-old shortstop. Like, you know, is this really a good defensive team? They had a segment on MLB Network that was pretty good where they led the league, according to Baseball Info Solutions, in positioning runs defensively. And so they're just really good at both making a pitching plan, executing that pitching plan, and then having a defensive plan that is in tandem with the pitching plan. So you can't miss by 3 feet. You can't say, okay, when we have this outside target, we need Tommy Edman to play closer to third base against this lefty because the lefty might go the other way, right? And then have the pitcher miss 3 feet in on the inside, you know, and have that guy pull the ball when he thought he'd push the ball. So there is it's a sort of whole team thing, and I think the Dodgers are really good at this, where they have a lot of resources, maybe more than the Yankees, or at least as much as the Yankees, devoted to research and development, and devoted to analysts, devoted to advanced scouting, and a lot of this only works if everyone's listening. If Dave Roberts is listening, if the players are listening, if the players are willing to make these micro adjustments to their defensive positioning, because you can give somebody a card and they can look at it and they can take a step, or they can take the 2 or 3 steps the card says. You know what I mean? Like I've talked to players where they're like, yeah, you know, I don't trust their defensive positioning. I don't, you know, so I do whatever. I do a little bit of it, but you know, sometimes I don't do it at all. You're like, oh, good. Reminds me of Little League. This last week in Little League, I was coaching third, and I was telling the guy on third, you know, when the catcher had dropped the ball or when he had it, and I was saying, and I would be like, stay. And then from one of the kids from the dugout yelled, "You don't have to listen to him. You can go whatever you want."
Just absolutely destroyed your base running plan in one fell swoop. Just completely.
I was like, "Do you want to know if the catcher got the ball or not?" He's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll keep telling you that."
Yeah, I think that's good information that most kids by that age decide is in fact valuable. I think you do see this reflected statistically in the year-over-year team BABIP leaderboards, right?
Oh,
so you look at the team BABIP leaderboards, batting average on balls in play. It's your defense working in concert with your pitching staff, is the way I think about BABIP as a team defensive stat. It's exactly how you described it.
Good locations, but then defense that's in the right places.
Regularly for the last 5 full seasons, you're going to see the Dodgers at or near the top of that leaderboard year over year, even as some of the names and faces change in that roster.
Like 20 years, dude.
Yeah,
That's
it goes
crazy.
all the way back.
There might be some park effects in there, but there's also a coaching effect that's been there for a while.
And prior to this season, the Yankees have also done well in that regard. They weren't bad by BABIP this year, but they weren't as good as they've been the last 2 seasons in 2024. So the defensive quality of these teams is both, I think, at least average. I think you can debate the Dodgers possibly being better than that. The important thing, though, is you mentioned some of the players that contributed. Miguel Rojas, who's been now injured during the postseason, was their leader in defensive runs saved at +8. He's not playing. He's been replaced by Tommy Edman as the shortstop. Edman's I
guess Mookie's the backup shortstop?
Yeah, Mookie would be the backup. Probably, yeah, it could be Kike Hernandez too, depending on what else they need to do. But that's kind of interesting that the guy that boosted that number the most isn't even out there right now. There's some other oddities in here too. A couple guys you don't think about for their defense. Teoscar Hernandez was a +5 in defensive runs saved in left.
Doesn't he have a really good arm?
Yeah, he's a +5 in right, but he's a -8 in left, which is really, really kind of quirky. And he's been playing more left in the postseason, right? So Max Muncy getting positive marks at third base, that's not really expected. Andy Pages is good in the corner.
True for outs above average as well. That's outs above average is the baseball savant number. Yeah. You're quoting defensive runs saved, which is a Baseball Info Solutions number.
That's the interesting thing is if you look at the outs above average, you get some different results. And even behind the plate, Dodgers pitchers have raved about Will Smith again, and this has actually been his worst year by defensive metrics. He's a -4 by defensive runs saved. He's worse than ever in framing.
Right?
Yeah, framing numbers haven't been good. We've wondered for a while, and the bat has kind of cooled off after a fast start. Hasn't been great in the postseason. Maybe he's been playing through an injury. Most catchers this time of year are not 100%
he's just
healthy.
super tired. We pointed out that in the postseason, the like offense is supposed to be 100 is average by WRC plus, but 100 is average. In the postseason over the last 5 years, we've seen an 87 from all offense. I mean, because you're using your best pitchers, you're doing these bullpenning strategies, all sorts of reasons why that might be the case. So it's 87 as opposed to 100 in the postseason, and catchers are at 62. So basically, offense goes down 13% in the postseason, and catcher offense goes down 38% in the postseason. So I think they're just tired. I think these guys, we ask a lot of them. They have to plan for pitching, their own pitching, the opposite pitching. They have to do defense. They have to do hitting. And what I hear is that Will Smith is grinding in the cage, and I almost think less is more. Will get out of there, just go get some froyo and chill with your dog or whatever. Do something different and try to get out of that headspace. But I would say that from a sort of a not looking at the numbers assessment, that most before this year, especially, I would have taken Will Smith defensively, offensively. I would have said this is a clear advantage with Austin Wells struggling offensively. He has at least been great defensively. We've seen that in this postseason. Him versus Bo Naylor was a slam dunk for Austin Wells. He was blocking pitches left and right, framing really well. So even if he's not contributing at the plate, I'm going to give Austin Wells the defensive advantage. Aaron Judge is not a great center fielder.
No, and it doesn't matter which system you look at, right? You mentioned outs above average before. In the team context, outs above average prefers the Yankees to the Dodgers, right? +9 is the Yankees number for the year, -4 outs above average for the Dodgers. So Dodgers are 19th by outs above average the team, 3rd by defensive runs saved.
So Yankees, you're putting a lot of pressure, and that includes Miguel Rojas too. So you're putting a lot of pressure on this sort of positioning excellence.
Yeah, and the difference is with outs above average, the agreement comes with both Wells and Volpe. So at least at the two positions, or two of the very important positions up the middle, the Yankees have graded out well, kind of across the board with Wells and Volpe.
In center.
In center, it doesn't matter what system you use. Aaron Judge is -9 by defensive runs saved. He's -5 by outs above average. Juan Soto is a -5 by outs above average. DRS is more kind at -1. Gleyber Torres is bad defensively at second base, no matter what system you like. He's -7 outs above average, -11 defensive runs saved. So you see some big negatives on the field, and that you could what do you prefer? Do you prefer a couple big strengths and then a couple of massive negatives, or do you like the more balanced sort of view that you get from the Dodgers when you start to look at both systems?
I do like having a really good shortstop and a really good catcher, though. I mean, if you just look at where balls go on the field and who gets the most attempts, who touches the ball the most, the catcher. Would you like to have one that really blocks well and frames well? Yeah. So I guess I'm going to start there. I guess I will give the Yankees a slight. We're doing this again. It's also slight. I'm going to give the Yankees a slight edge in defensive value.
I think I'm with you as far as where I would go, which I would prefer, but I don't think either one of these teams is bad defensively, and we'll just see if an untimely error is the thing that ends up making the difference and swings a game that ultimately determines this series. But if there's a clear on paper advantage, it's a small one to say the least.
Well, you forgot one, base running. That one's pretty funny.
Yeah. So I did.
This one's not close.
Yeah, we had it on the screen before, but the base running difference, there's a weighted stolen base stat over at Fangraphs, and it looks at your successful stolen bases versus your caught stealing. And the Dodgers were 3rd in that metric. The Yankees were tied for 26th. So that's the other part of these two teams when you go side by side, and there's not many of them where you go, whoa, that's a pretty big difference. Do you think the Dodgers will try to exploit their ability on the base paths Like, I mean, Wells isn't a bad defensive catcher, so it's not an easy situation overall to run, but that's an area where the Dodgers could have an edge that the Yankees have a few guys that can steal bases effectively, but I think the Dodgers just have a few more of them. I mean, Ohtani at the very top, Betts, both of those guys can be very good on the base paths, and they have other guys at the bottom of the order that can also run.
Well, one of the weird things is that you steal the bases off of the pitcher. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily the catcher. People think of the catcher as, oh, he throws the ball, the pop time, what's the number of seconds it takes him to get to the ball to second base. But what has happened is that catchers over time, the difference between the best catcher pop time and the worst catcher pop time has really gotten small. So the difference between the best pitchers at getting the ball to the plate quickly and the worst, that has not coalesced in the same way. The Yankees gave up 120. The Yankees pitchers gave up 122 stolen bases on the year. That was 13th in the big leagues. But it's a little bit more important to go and look at who gave them up. And that's your answer. Your answer is they're going to try and run wild on Marcus Stroman. 25 stolen bases allowed this year.
If Stroman even gets into a game.
That's right. So you can't weight that too heavily. Stroman is maybe part of the bullpen, or maybe a guy who eats innings in a loss, So I would say, no, that's not a big deal. Here's where it's a slightly bigger deal. They stole 21 against Carlos Rodon, which is weird because he's a lefty, but it's the case. And they stole 15 on Garrett Cole in 95 innings. So against those two, that's going to be what you do. And it sort of gives you a little bit of preview of how those games might go. Because if you, like, Rodon and Cole are maybe going to go deeper than any other pitchers in this series, maybe go 5. And if they go 5 and they're pitching well, they may not give up any base runners. But when they do give up a base runner, that base runner is likely to want to push the issue. That base runner is going to try and get throws over, get 2 throws over. If you get a third throw over, you get basically a free base, So they're going to try and push the issue. They're going to try and get out there in big leagues. They're going to try and attract because they may not have as many base runners. There may be more pressure on getting that guy to second off a walk, Get Ohtani to second. Get these guys to second. So my prediction is it may not make a big deal over much of the series, but it could make a big deal in the Rodon and Cole starts. And that's important because that may force Rodon or Cole out earlier than they want. And one of the advantages, now that we go to the pitcher breakdown, is that I give the Yankees a clear advantage when it comes to starting pitching.
Yeah, I think when you start to break it down on a game-by-game basis, that's when you can kind of see it come together. Cole versus Jack Flaherty in game 1, even if you're talking about 85% of Pete Garrett Cole right now because of the time he lost to injury, maybe the stuff not coming all the way back, that's still better than this version of Jack Flaherty, who just recently has gone through a downturn in velocity.
I mean, he's throwing 92 right now. He is so much better when he's over 94. He gives up, like 50% more homers when he's on fastballs that are under 94. So, he's sitting 92 right now. And it's not with great command either. And he's kind of a 2-pitch pitcher. Sometimes he's, throws a curve in the sinker or some, but, you're talking about a pretty easy choice for me.
Yeah. So I have no pushback on that whatsoever. I'm Cole over Flaherty. I think most people would be. Game 2 still has not been announced by the Yankees, at least at the time of this recording. We have wondered if it's just Carlos Rodon because he's their second best starter, or if because games 3, 4, and 5 are all lumped together without any off days in between, if they might split Cole and Rodon to maybe take some wear and tear off of their bullpen, expecting Rodon to get deeper into his start, right? You're going to have a chance for...
He's gone the deepest into his starts in the postseason this year.
Yeah, so...
a whole 5 and 1 out, 5 and 1/3 on average.
5 1/3. Okay, so
that's your new deep into the start. I mean, if anybody is listening to this that hasn't been paying full attention, like the days of sort of Madison Bumgarner and the complete game shutouts in the postseason are long gone. I mean, the Dodgers got 60% of their outs from the bullpen against in the postseason so far. I mean, that's your starter going 3 2/3.
Right. And I think as we look at the starting pitching breakdown, I think if you use your relievers as much as the Dodgers do, giving something up, having an edge go to the Yankees with the starters may not matter if your bullpen is better, and your bullpen is by design going to be used a lot more anyway. But as far as the game 2 matchup goes, given what you just said about Rodon, and considering how nasty the Dodgers are against left-handed pitching, they had a 121 WRC plus against lefties during the regular season. That could also make it difficult for Rodon to get deeper than 5 innings into the start. We've talked about the importance of Rodon maybe getting to Shohei Ohtani a third time because of the lack of power lefties that they have in that bullpen. That's sort of the tipping point, though. Beyond that, maybe you don't want him to see Mookie Betts a third time. Maybe you don't want him to see Teoscar Hernandez a third time, depending on how close these games are. I think when you consider 5 and change as sort of the ceiling, it makes you look more at Rodon versus Yamamoto, if that ends up being the game 2 pitching matchup, as more of a toss-up, because Yamamoto has been limited also coming back late in the season from an injury. But, I mean, Yamamoto could be a top 10 starting pitcher in Major League Baseball at this point. He has that type of skills floor. And I think our main questions about him are more just about health and effectiveness coming off this injury. And he's passed a few tests along the way. So I think I'd give the game 2 edge just slightly to Yamamoto, even if it's Carlos Rodon taking the ball for the Yankees.
Yeah, I think so. But I will flip that again in game 3. Even if they use Clark Schmidt against Walker Buehler, I'm going to take Clark Schmidt. I think that's an awkward game 3 pairing for both teams because it is 3 in a row there, and to some extent, both teams will be doing a bullpenish game for game 4. So that said, I take Clark Schmidt because I think he can go 4. I'm not even sure Walker Buehler can go 4. And one of the reasons why I say this, even though Walker Buehler just came off a great start, in that great start against the Mets, everybody showed the best movement of the year. And we looked a little bit closer into it, and there was a headwind. There was a wind going out to center, and it was cold. Now, when you're throwing a pitch, you actually want cold weather because that's more drag and the pitch moves more. A headwind also creates more movement. So what happened in that game was Walker Buehler had the best movement on his pitches of the year. Those conditions may not show up again. And if you look back to Walker Buehler before that, he was basically bouncing the curveball in front of the plate, really focusing a lot on the cutter, and not really showing a good slider. So he was too small of an arsenal to go deep into games. Poor command on the curveball. I think Clark Schmidt will go deeper. Clark Schmidt this year has figured out that he can throw his sinker high to lefties, and he can throw his sweeper, to get called strikes against lefties. And he also threw the cutter more than ever against lefties. So he's figured something out against lefties this year. The cutter and the curve are the basis. He also can do some stuff other than that. I like Clark Schmidt to go deeper, and that's going to be important in game 4, where I also give the Yankees the advantage because I think they've got Luis Gil, perhaps Nestor Cortez. I take that for depth over guys like Ben Kasparias and Landon Knack. They have to get some guys to go 4 or 5 innings, and if that's in the middle of a 3-game series, in 3 days, then I have to give the Yankees the advantage in game 5 as well because they haven't used their relievers as much theoretically. So, I think one of the things that people may not know is, longtime listeners of this will know that, the third time you see a starting pitcher in a game, the advantage flips 100% to the batter. And that's something that, if you've been watching the games, that's why they're taking out the starters earlier. What we've recently found out is the third time you see a reliever in the same series, you get the same effect. It's a familiarity effect. You see that curveball, you know that shape. Oh, you see, you don't even, you maybe not even be able to tell us exactly what you see, but you see something. Your body starts to get used to it. Oh, you're like, oh, that finger or that, or he does this, or you may not even know what it is, but you get more comfortable against those shapes. The third time you see a reliever in a series, you hit over 800 against them as an OPS. Sorry.
Yeah, as an OPS, not a batting average.
Yeah. So the Mets did, the Dodgers did a great job of this in the Mets series. They only had one end game reliever. They, Edgardo Henriquez, they're the guy that they called up. He was their in losses guy. He saw guys multiple times. He was their kind of cleanup guy. In their regular sort of A bullpen, their wins bullpen, only one reliever saw a Mets player 3 times. It was Ryan Brazier against Pete Alonso 3 times. And that was the only one. But the longer this series goes, and the more that Walker doesn't go deep, or the more that they use them in games 3 and 4, the harder it is to finagle that grid so that you don't see that same. You can't use Nestor Cortez against Shohei Ohtani 3 times, and on the flip side, you can't use Alex Vesia against Juan Soto more than 3 times, or even 3 times. So they're going to hamstring each other. The longer this goes into, the deeper this series goes, the more the Yankees' starting pitching depth matters.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair way to assess it. So we're giving the starting pitching edge to the Yankees. When we talked about the bullpens in detail on Wednesday, a lot of the quality on that list, within the top 5 relievers in the series, I think the Dodgers had 4 of them. Like Luke Weaver was the only Yankees reliever that cracked your top 5, if memory serves me right. You're giving some kind of edge to the Dodgers. Are you giving them enough of a bump in the relief corps to say pitching's actually even because they have the quality and the depth necessary to get the matchups they want, to overcome their planned bullpen game, and to work around the schedule? It's worked so far. This is easily the toughest test yet, given the quality of the Yankees lineup. Is the pitching a wash, or is it still an advantage Yankees because they have enough surplus in the starting pitching advantage?
I have a pitching plan going up on The Athletic tomorrow where I discuss a lot of these issues and how you might plan this. And one of the things I came up with was this idea of counting the Ohtani outs and counting the Soto outs. And this is the way that you can look at it. Let's say your starter can go through the lineup twice. You don't want to see it a third time. So hitters get to the plate 5 times a game. It becomes math, right? So a hitter gets to the plate 5 times a game. 2 times can go to my starter. That means 3 times are going to my pen. I want to win 4 games, right? 3 times 4 is 12. So you have 12 Ohtani outs and 12 Soto outs. And you don't really want to see anybody 3 times. Mm-hmm. So the magic number is to have basically 5 relievers that you could use against these guys. So that is where I think the Dodgers' brilliance will come through. They do have the righties to neutralize Judge and Stanton. They do. If you think about it, Kopech. If you want to talk about 12 outs from Judge and Stanton, you can Kopech, Brazier, Daniel Hudson, Evan Phillips, Blake Trinan. That's 5. So you can limit it to 2 times each, and maybe Trinan gets 3, So that's doable. It's the lefties that are a problem for both. Because if you need 12 outs against Juan Soto, you give 3 to Vesia. That's 3. You didn't want to give him 3. You give 3 to Banda. That's 3. You didn't want to give him 3. And you give 3 to Trinan, who throws a sinker and a slider against the lefty. Or you go with Kopech, who throws a great high fastball It's great. And it's theoretically good against lefties. Oh, wait, Soto's amazing high in the zone and against people who don't have good command. That sounds like Michael Kopech. So in my plan, I suggest Daniel Hudson is the third guy that you use against Soto, but it's still only 3. This is where the location will start to matter too. The Dodgers had below average location. If you look at Location Plus, which is a count and pitch type judge of how good your locations are at the plate, in the playoffs we've seen way above average stuff in the playoffs, and that makes sense. You use your best pitchers, you don't use your worst pitchers. But we've seen a slightly below average command in the postseason. The Dodgers have been worse than that. The Yankees have been better than that. And that'll matter when you're facing these really patient lineups. So there's going to be I think there's going to be a lot of walks in the series. And that's going to put pressure on these guys. And, and then if you're trying to limit the amount of times that your reliever sees them, you can do it okay if you're the Dodgers against righties, but Soto is going to be a problem. Ohtani is going to be a problem.
Yeah, I think some of the depth relievers that work well in the regular season in the 5th and 6th inning against non-playoff teams a lot of times, and occasionally they come through against playoff teams too. Those are the guys that are obviously the most vulnerable. An example in the Yankees bullpen is Jake Cousins. I think Jake Cousins is filthy. He's got excellent stuff, but it's well below average command. And the Dodgers can make him pay.
Betts,
Yeah, those. If he doesn't execute really well, those plate appearances could get very long, and then he's in danger of making a mistake out over the plate. And those hitters are, as a group, more than good enough to punish him for it, right? So that's where I just kind of look up and down that bullpen and think there are more matchups I like where the Dodgers, even though you don't feel good in many of these situations, you feel better about the Dodgers relievers with multiple matchups that work against the Yankees than you do going the other direction. That's the thing that I think is going to be really kind of critical as the series goes on. And we saw it in the usage too, up to this point. Think about the usage of Luke Weaver and Clay Holmes and some of the guys they've leaned really heavily on. They just tried as much as they could to stretch an extra out or two here and there from a lot of those A relievers. Is there going to be a cumulative wear and tear on a guy like Weaver, especially? Of all the relievers in the World Series, Luke Weaver has been worked the most. 84 innings during the regular season, a bunch of appearances in the postseason that have gone more than 1 inning. He may get to 100 total innings for the season by the end of the series. We saw him dust off the cutter in the ALCS, so he's added that wrinkle. He's going to need that. If they're going to use him that much again in this series, he's going to have everything working.
Yeah, and we do know from multiple pieces of research. I found one recently. J.C. Bradbury, the economist, did a piece where he found that every pitch over the course of a season adds fatigue to a reliever and makes him worse. But we've also quoted a Russell Carlton piece from Baseball Prospectus that found the same thing. So you're right. I mean, Weaver is, there's a lot of fatigue there. I wonder, and this is something that hasn't been studied as hard, is like I wonder about season-to-season fatigue. He has not been a reliever for long. And he's still froggy because this is his first time doing this as a reliever and he feels good, so it's kind of hard to parse that all the way down, but you're right. They have been used more in the postseason. They've been used more during the regular season. They could be more fatigued than the Dodgers crew. On the other hand, some of these Dodgers are pitching better in the postseason. Daniel Hudson, he threw 2 miles an hour softer in September. I don't know if he was just preparing. He's like, I know I'm going to have to throw harder in October. I'm just going to dial it down here. I thought maybe he was injured. His fastball velocity was going down. He has seen a real spike in his stuff in the postseason, and we've seen that from some of the Dodgers relievers. But I tend to like. There's a little bit of me that's like, put away the advanced metrics, put away the numbers, put away the velo. Look at the name of the back of the jersey. We're counting on guys like Ryan Brazier, Anthony Banda, Daniel Hudson. We're counting them as like way better than what the Yankees have because the Dodgers have used them. But did the Dodgers use them because they thought that they were elite relievers, or because they were pushed in that corner because their starters weren't doing anything? And if I told you, even in September, that the Dodgers are going to go do really well because of Anthony Banda, Carlos Rodon, Anthony Banda, Daniel Hudson, and I don't know who's really stepped forward for them. That is a little bit of a surprise.
Kasparius has been good in the bottom, but Brazier in
those
higher
three
spots,
then you'd be like, you're crazy. Those guys aren't that good. So there's still a chance that like we're counting guys as elite that aren't.
A recency bias.
Yeah, to some extent. And we can use these numbers. Like I can tell you Stuff Plus is a number that looks at just the physical characteristics of the pitch, and it's really useful in small samples, and it's really most powerful in small samples. And I can tell you Daniel Hudson is pitching to a 123 Stuff Plus, and that's really good. That's, better than almost anybody in the postseason not named Rodon, and Weaver. So that suggests, no, he's good. But Anthony Banda's is 98 Stuff Plus. Ryan Brazier's 110. Those three are the key. Like we're talking about the bottom of the lineups, for the Yankees and the Dodgers. The bottom of the lineup, quote unquote, for the Dodgers on the pitching side is Brazier, Banda, and Hudson. They have to come through.
The last pitching matchup question I have for you is, are there tendencies that either of these teams have from a granular level, a pitch specific level, that you think can be exploited?
Yeah, I think that some of it actually just makes things more difficult, but the Dodgers threw the second most four-seam fastballs in the postseason so far, and it served them well. But the Yankees have crushed fastballs this postseason and during the regular season. And it's not only the top guys. The only people who have struggled in the postseason against fastballs are Jazz and Wells, this lineup. So you got 7 guys who crush fastballs against a Dodgers team that's coming in throwing fastballs. That's going to be an interesting matchup. Another thing that sort of a secondary part of this is the Dodgers during the regular season, they were better than average by every pitch type. They were so good at every pitch type. Their pitchers were better than average at everything except for sinkers and changeups. Yankees hitters, second best in baseball against sinkers, above average against changeups. Judge and Soto were the 3rd and 5th best against the sinker in baseball this year. Torres was 8th. And Judge in particular, we just put Trinan on the Judge list. How to get Judge out a bunch of times? Trinan. Well, Trinan throws 34% sinkers. That's a super sinker. Maybe Judge is going to see that. Maybe Judge can handle that. Anthony Banda is supposed to go up against Soto. He's our Soto guy. He was our second Soto guy. He throws 24% sinkers, and Soto was 5th best against the sinker this year. And Gleyber Torres was 8th best against sinkers. So, and Ryan Brazier throws 16% sinkers. So it's like, that's like the subset of the fastball problem. But there's it kind of goes the other way too. The Yankees have thrown the second most changeups in baseball in the postseason this year. The Yankees have Tommy Kahnle, who's throwing 90% changeups this postseason. But you also have Luke Weaver, who you might circle and say, okay, he's going to get me 3 of my Ohtani outs because he's got a good changeup. The Dodgers were the best team in baseball against the changeup this year. Teoscar was the second best bat in baseball against them. Freeman was 11th. Ohtani was 14th. Even Pages and Enrique would have been top 15 if they had had more plate appearances. So Tommy Kahnle, who's been really good he's been kind of we needed somebody like this to step up for the Yankees, right? You may not want to throw him against Teoscar, and you may not want to throw him as much as the series, or you may want to tell him, hey, dude, you got to throw something else at least once or twice. Even if, as we discovered yesterday with Trevor May on this podcast, even if it's possible Tommy Kahnle actually has 2 changeups, it's still going to be an issue for the Yankees to think about, is that this is a really good changeup hitting team. So that's going to lead to some, small things where you're like, okay, Judge hits 700 against sweepers. I don't really want to throw Evan Phillips against Judge a bunch, right? And then you're going to say, okay, Teoscar Hernandez slugged like 800 against changeups, and I don't really want to throw Tom McCanley against Teoscar Hernandez, So, but you're also the back of the head. You're like, oh well, I don't want to 3 times. Okay, I definitely don't want to do 4 times. God, so you're like, it's a math problem, and that's what the front offices are doing right now. They're sitting down with the manager, with the pitching coach, with the analysts, and they're trying to do that grid where they're like, how can we not have them see our guys too often, have the A bullpen ready, not have Teoscar see Conley, not have Judge see Phillips. You know what I mean? They're like, they're trying to do this. And because it's so complicated, that's led to a more rigid pitching plan than I think fans want to acknowledge. And that'll lead to decisions where you're surprised as a fan. This guy is dealing. Carlos Rodon is dealing. Why is he coming out of the game? Walker Buehler is dealing. Why is he coming out of the game? And one of the most fundamental pieces of research that has been replicated over and over again that I just have to tell you is true and is behind a lot of this is there's no such thing as dealing. It doesn't exist. And I know that's hard to believe, but you can dice it any way you want. You can take guys who are doing great and look at what they did in the next inning. Average. You can take guys who are going good. Average. You can take guys with the fastball velocities up. Average. There's no such thing as dealing. And so the only thing that matters is matchups and getting the right matchups that you want. And that's the grid. And so they have a grid and they're going to stick mostly to it. And the only big difference will be what happens in the score.
Right.
They have their A bullpen.
If you have a lead, you protect it. Maybe you let someone go deeper than you would because it's one fewer look at one of your relievers. If you're up 3 or 4, oh, okay, he's pitching well enough. We got a big enough lead. We'll go until there's trouble. We'll go until there's traffic.
Some of my evidence for this is the Mets-Dodgers series where there was blowouts, right? Mm-hmm. What happened in the wins for the Dodgers is our A bullpen, according to the grid, exactly what we want. Nobody sees anyone 3 times. Bang, 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 right? What happens to the losses? Hey, Henriquez, Honeywell. Come on, guys. Right.
Yeah, you have 1 or 2 guys on the roster that are just going to try and get 5 or 6 innings so nobody else gets out there. That's the chaos that I think enters the series, though, is if your A relievers get hit, if you lose the matchups you want, and you can lose the matchups you want. I think if this conversation is highlighting anything, it's the margins are so slim. If your command isn't there, if the hitter just puts a good swing, if they just anticipate what you're going to do really well, if they have the book that you have on them and they're prepared, they are good enough.
Or you miss by damage. Like Tanner Bybee missed his spot against Giancarlo Stanton by about 10 inches. That's about average for missing your spot in baseball. And it was that big homer.
Yeah, Stanton hit the ball 120 miles an hour.
Yeah. So another way of putting this is like some of this is going to be impossible. So let's say you're facing Shohei Ohtani. And you've got a good split finger. Oh, well, Shohei Ohtani slugged 1,000 against split fingers this year. Oh, so you're going to go to your curveball? Shohei Ohtani slugged 882 against curveballs this year. Oh, so maybe you just fill up the zone with sliders. That's a good idea. 826 against sliders. Okay, well, you can't do all that and also be good against 639 against four-seam fastballs. Oh, but I've got a good changeup. 621 against changeups. Well, he wouldn't expect a sinker, would he? 518 against sinkers. Well, I'm going to get him with the cutter. 508 slugging against the cutter. I found something. He slugged 0 against knuckleballs.
There it is.
We got a plan.
Just throw away. Oh, wait. No one throws those.
Yeah, right. I mean, so to some extent, we try to set up these things. You try to set up a grid. You try to set up a plan. And then maybe just excellence will shine through. Strength on strength. Maybe Ohtani will just take that best pitch that you thought Nestor Cortez has a good record against Ohtani so far, and it's lefty on lefty. It should be a good matchup, and then Ohtani says, "No, man, I'm just gonna hit you a grand slam right now."
Or the Michael Kopech splits against Aaron Judge, where he's held him hitless so far, and he's got a bunch of strikeouts against him. Well, he missed, and Judge hit it 430 feet. So that split didn't matter, and that changed everything. All right, so all of this considered, who wins the series, how many games does it go, and who ends up winning the MVP honors?
In order for these, I think all of these things need to be true in order for my prediction to be true. I think in order for the Yankees to win, it has to go deep, because then their starting pitching matters more, and you're starting to see the Dodgers bullpen 3 and 4 times, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking 6 or 7, and I'm thinking the Yankees, and I'm thinking nobody can get Soto out. So
okay,
that's my deal.
So you're Yankees in 6, you're saying,
Yankees
with Soto?
6, yeah. I think Carlos Rodon in my plan ends up pitching game 6. I forget.
Yeah, he'll get a repeat of game 2, most likely in game 6 from a matchup perspective.
Yeah, so Yankees in 6. Juan Soto is the MVP.
All right, I'm on the Dodgers side. Dodgers in 6, same number of games. I think Yoshinobu Yamamoto shoves twice in this series, and it ends up being a huge
with the
performance.
Extra day of rest, he can do 2 and 6.
Yep, I think he'll have 5 days rest between those 2 starts. Both of those starts are going to be at Dodger Stadium, not Yankee Stadium. I think that bodes well. So I think Yamamoto comes through.
If he pitches like 12 innings of 1-run ball, I think he would get the MVP maybe.
There's a shot at it. If even if he gives him 10, that might jump off the page. If the rest of the series is such a slugfest, we see a pitcher come through with 10 really great innings, 10 Ks. I think that's my narrative. That's how they did it, because if Yamamoto comes through in those 2 starts, it takes pressure off the pen at critical times.
They only have to win 2 other games, you know?
Yep. And I think that's so much of this series is going to be such a gridlock. I'll say for my MVP, it's so hard to go against Ohtani, but how about Max Muncy for an MVP? We talked about the lack of
wait everybody out.
Mm-hmm. Couple of clutch homers. We'll say Max Muncy for an MVP prediction from me on this one. So opposite sides, a lot of different ways this could play out.
For every Corey Seager MVP in the World Series, there's a Steve Pearce. We've had Corey Seager twice. We've had Steve Pearce types, 2 or 3 times in the last few years. So
yeah, we're going to be here all week talking about it, breaking it down, looking at stories from outside the World Series as well. So be sure to follow us as you watch this series. Join our Discord. The link is in the show description. You can chat along during each game of the series. As I mentioned up top, really looking forward to this one getting underway. Give us a follow on Twitter. Eno is at Eno Sarris. I am at VanRiper. The pod is at Rates and Barrels. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.